to everyone who's here today. I just ask that folks mute unless you're wanting to say something, but otherwise, if you could mute, that would be great. So my name is Beth Lewis, and I'm the field director at Bryn Mawr College Graduate School of Social Work and Social Research, which you can see behind me, although I'm not there. And we are very pleased to welcome you all to our Q&A for field educators and students who are interested in ways to engage and mobilize voters in field agencies and in the communities they serve. I would like to take this opportunity just to introduce the other members of the Field Education Work Group who put this together of the National Social Work Voter Mobilization Campaign. In alphabetical order, Patricia Digby of the University of Mississippi, who is the field director there, and I believe that she couldn't make it to the meeting today, but I wanted to acknowledge her. Kaneko Okuda of George Mason University is here. Becky Sander of Silberman School of Social Work at Hunter College, and Katerina Warner of the University of Montana. And from the campaign leadership, I also want to acknowledge that we have co-chairs Mimi Abramovitz of Silberman School of Social Work and Terry Mizrahi, formerly of Silberman School of Social Work, Gina McClendon of Brown School at Washington U, and I'm not sure if Gina was able to make it today, but if so, we thank her for her work. And Tanya Smith of UConn's Nancy Humphreys Institute for Political Social Work, who will be speaking about one of the assignments that we are.
And Beth, this is Terry. Hi, my camera's down. I'm just saying hello to everybody by voice. Just so you know, I'm here. I see a lot of familiar faces, and most importantly, so many wonderful folks who I don't know yet. So great, and thank you everybody for this extra campaign. I see Alberto Fuentes, who connects us to VoteER and to the Macro Social Work Student Network, among other of his wonderful work.
Terrific. Thank you, Terry. I wonder, is Melissa Reitmeyer on?
I am on.
Oh, wonderful. Good, because I wanted to start with you. Before I do that, I just wanted to say that what we're going to do today is we are going to hear from Dr. Melissa Reitmeyer, who chairs the Council on Field Education with CSWE. And then we are going to move to hear about the assignments in greater detail. We can take some questions as Tanya and Katerina discuss the assignments. And then we're going to hear from student groups who are carrying out work at their respective schools and campuses. And then after that, we'll have a general Q&A. If you have any questions as we're going along, we ask that you put them in the chat and address them to everyone. And we'll field the questions as we go along. So now we are going to hear from, well, before that, I just wanted to say one thing in opening, that we recognize the field group and the whole leadership of the campaign, that this is a very challenging time, but it's also a time with a lot of opportunities for social work education. And the whole area of civic engagement and voting and the role of the helping professional in this area is rising in prominence throughout the society, really, and among the professions, including our own. And certainly the impact of the pandemic in social service delivery is felt most acutely, probably in field education. So we are happy to be able to provide a framework for involving students in voter and civic engagement with clients and communities, and at the same time provide meaningful remote field assignments that can provide students with required time, a way to earn required time in a range of different settings. And as we know, the general election is quickly approaching, so certainly this is critical at this time, but we also see these assignments as serving a purpose throughout the year, as well as from year to year. So now I'd like to take this time to introduce Dr. Melissa Reitmeyer, who, as I said, is chair of COFI and is field director and faculty at the University of South Carolina and a great supporter of the work of the campaign. And she's graciously joined us here today, and we're pleased to hear her remarks on this topic. So take it away.
Okay. First, I just want to say I'm really honored to serve as the chair for the Council on Field Education, for the Council on Social Work Education. I just started that in July of this year, which will go through the next 3 years. And, you know, I've just been very impressed with the work that this group has done. And on behalf of COFI, we are very supportive and endorse the campaign. There have been a lot of materials that have been developed for the implementation for field programs to use with students that do provide, like Dr. Lewis said, great opportunities for students in not only identifying connection to competency, but getting engaged in their communities during a very pivotal and I would say historic time. When you think about the intersectionality of racism, COVID, and kind of the political climate, this really is a time for the social work as a profession to step up and engage. And I feel very proud of the fact that we have such great leaders in our Voting as Social Work campaign to kind of direct and lead us in that fight. And it's, you know, that's one of the things that is really an honor as chair, is to see all the wonderful work that all of the programs are doing around the country in terms of field education and the innovations that are evolving as a result of difficult and hard times. So it's a moment to really take hold of when you think that we have 533 accredited baccalaureate social work programs, 288 accredited Master of Social Work programs, and then around 60 that are in candidacy. You're talking about Voting as Social Work campaign, which is led by all of you wonderful folks under the direction of Dr. Beth Lewis, providing these resources to hundreds, almost 1,000 programs that are training our next workforce of social workers, which is pretty impressive. And I don't want to really repeat anything that Dr. Lewis said about, you know, this campaign to me is exceptionally important because of the intersectionality I talked about earlier, but especially given COVID-19, because it really does complicate voting for many. And it creates a lot of uncertainty about heading to the polls. And so I think this is why really getting engaged now and participating with this campaign is really important. And it is exceptionally important because of that build on skills in voter and civic engagement and how we're role modeling things for the next generation of social workers. And so I'm just really pleased to see how many are on this call and how many folks are participating. And for me, it's really just an honor to be a part of this. And I really thank everyone for letting me say a few words at the beginning and being a part of this.
Thank you. Yeah, I see that we have over 100 participants, which is really, really fabulous. Thank you, Melissa. So let's move into, I don't know, yeah. Let's move into a discussion of the actual assignments, and Tanya Smith is going to start that out and also involve, I think, students from UConn.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I am going to share my screen. Can you all see it? Okay, great. So presumably we're going to go through a lot of things today. And I first of all, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being a part of this really important call to action to our profession. And, you know, presumably because you're here, you understand that, you know, our democracy is a threat, is at a critical point. We know that it didn't start now, but voter suppression and turnout have always mattered. And any kind of voter suppression, you know, threatens the legitimacy of a democracy, but also, you know, when we look at the work that we do as social workers and the work for social justice, racial justice, economic justice, all those things come together when we talk about voting and the importance of voter turnout. And so, as I said, presumably you know that, but you know, this is our democracy was sort of designed by and for people of power. And so there's a lot of discomfort out there because the rules are different in all 50 states. It is complicated by design. There are also intentional suppression tactics that we all need to address. And what we're trying to do with, let me just see if I can share here. What we want to do today is to talk about ways that you can build the confidence and the skills of students and agencies. You know, field is the hub for all of this because we see this as sort of student-driven and schools of social work-driven change in practice. Because when students, you know, do these things and they bring them to their field agency, we see so much opportunity for actually changing the culture of our agencies and our communities to encourage voter turnout, not just in 2020, but in every election. So I'm going to go through some things really quickly.
All right.
You have them on our website. And so I won't spend a lot of time, and then I will ask Angela Bellis, who is a doctoral candidate at University of Connecticut and a GA with the Humphreys Institute, to share an exciting new initiative that she started, kicked off actually last night. So, and Beth, jump in. You're managing time, but jump in at any time. And as I said, there's the chat box if you have any questions. But what we're going to focus on now, and again, we're going to go through it very quickly, are ways that field can get students involved in voter turnout and in mobilizing voters, not just other students, but clients, their communities engaged in the election, and also ways to make an emotional connection for students and connect the work of voter turnout to the things that they care about. So, you know, that's what a lot of this is trying to do, is to connect it to movements like Black Lives Matters, I mean, or any other social justice movement that we're talking about. There is no more powerful tool than the vote, as the great John Lewis said. So here are some examples of things that we suggest, and I will tie and close this all out with our sample list of tying this to the core competencies in social work education in just a minute. But here are some ideas here. And again, I can't stress enough that really bringing students together to understand voting as a human right is really important, and what voter suppression looks like in communities. So documentaries like Rigged, documentaries like The Power Broker, you know, all of those things give them a perspective on this hard fought right that we have been working for and that is being threatened today, and that their role in changing it. And so, you know, the first thing we can do is to just sort of get everybody understanding what the rules are in their state, because in all 50 states, it's different deadlines. So we've got some assignments on our website, but getting students to really dig into what those rules are. And again, everything on our website is available in terms of being a resource for special populations, but how people vote. Do students understand the absentee ballot process? So giving them a chance to research it for themselves is really important. Voting with a felony is, you know, the part of voter suppression has been this restriction on voting with a felony conviction. And in all 50 states, it's different. There are 2 states that don't have any restrictions on voting, even while you're incarcerated. And there are many states that have differing rules, and some make it very, very hard to vote ever. And we know this is playing out in the courts. So getting students involved in the movement in your state, you know, we would argue that all forms of suppression undermine the legitimacy of a democracy. We've got lots of resources around that. Getting students to understand that in lots of communities, there's not good information on candidates. Have them look up, not thinking about the president, but have them look up and see if they can find information on the other races happening in 2020. You know, that assignment of itself can start to see why this system creates so many barriers to being an informed and engaged voter. So I won't go through all of this. I will say that looking up voter turnout, a lot of these things can be a little bit frustrating, but also very, very instructive for them to understand that maybe their experience voting, you know, if they come from a community where it's not highly mobile and maybe it takes them 5 minutes to vote, understanding that voting in another community that might have you know, people moving more often. We know that there are studies out there, like out of the Brennan Center for Justice, that show that communities of color wait in line longer. So getting them to understand what those are, there's never been, well, at least in the last 10 years, I don't think there's been more of a spotlight on what voter suppression looks like as there is now. So there are certainly many great resources, and we've got them on our website.
Tanya?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Is there a place, someone asked about whether convicted felons can vote in New York State. Is there a place on the website that takes people to that information?
Yes, I believe there is. And actually, I always have to, yes, you can get that information on our website. And New York State is a state where you can vote after parole ends, I believe. It's definitely one of those ones, but it's a great question because 20 million people in our country have a felony conviction. And we know in 2016, nearly 6 million of them were barred from voting. But the problem is that with all these 50 states and all these different rules, and also voter suppression in general, it leads to this narrative and these myths that you can't vote for with a felony conviction ever. So it's really important for social workers and students to know what the specific rules on their state. Thank you, Beth. That's a great question, whoever asked it. So I'm just going to go through this quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Angela. But the one other thing I would say that we do at UConn is that we integrate these assignments into a required course. And one of the ones that has been really impactful in Connecticut is to have students do an organizational assessment of their field placement. And we've put the tool on our website, and if you have any suggestions, we always welcome them. But we want students to think about, what if all of the organizations that we work with ask people about their voter registration, if they help them with when, where, and how to vote, if they connected them to information on the candidates, nonpartisan guides, and if they really encourage them to vote in all elections. So what would that look like on an organizational setting if you're a school, if you're a high school, if you're a hospital, if you're a nursing home? You know, how can this work be integrated into social service agencies? And you can't require that students do it, but they can certainly do that critical thinking experience, you know, to do that assessment and have that conversation with their field supervisor. So we've found that that's been a really great tool for opening up dialogue and room for change in practice. So, and then there's also just getting students to do the actual voter registration. And Angela's I'm gonna ask Angela to share the voter power core, but at UConn, again, every first year student, as part of their assignment, has to register 3 voters as part of their course assignment. So you can't require that they do it at agencies, but we can ask them to do it, and it can be in their own circles and in their own networks. But getting that experience, touching and actually reaching out to voters, and that's where Vote ER and Alberto Cifuentes is on this call, or on this, those tools to make it easy are really enormously helpful. And so I'll stop here. I'll just say that this is on our website, and all of these activities that we're talking about align with CSWE's and social work's 9 core competencies. So any student that wants to include this on their educational contract can understand how this ties to social work's mission, our ethical mandate, and our impact. So I can't see everybody because it's a small screen, but I don't know, Angela, if you would share.
I'm here.
Great.
Sure. So thank you. Tanya had asked me to speak for just a few minutes about our brand new UConn Hartford Voting Power Core, which we are really excited about launching out of the Humphreys Institute. And it is actually a cross-campus initiative, including both MSW students and undergraduate students from the UConn Hartford campus. And so we did launch with our first information session last night, and we continue to recruit students to participate. In the current context that we are all living through and working through, part of what has really made recruitment easy among our MSW students is that we are able to allow them to use their Voting Power Core hours as field hours if they aren't currently engaged in a specific field placement yet, or with the approval of their field supervisor. And so we have basically recruited what is looking like now about a group of 20 students who are committing themselves to increasing their own civic literacy, and also increasing civic literacy and voting power in the UConn Hartford community and surrounding communities. And what we are planning on doing with a fuller launch over this next week is hosting a half-day Voting Power Summit, where we're bringing in several of our community partners to prepare or present these mini workshops in really critical content and skill development areas to launch folks in the community in terms of the nonpartisan voter engagement work that they'll be doing, and the level of civic education that our students really in many ways are primed to do. And so in addition to the summit to prepare our students, we'll be hosting weekly capacity building roundtables where our students will come together. Again, everything is going to be bite-sized with this Voting Power Core because it's what we all need in the lives we're living right now. So our students will come together weekly, and they will receive brief training on nonpartisan voter registration, on facilitating community conversations on difficult topics, things that social work students and social workers are really great at doing. They'll also be asked to potentially participate in nonpartisan phone banking and text banking to communicate and outreach to inactive voters and possibly to unregistered voters. And so these roundtables are really going to be about building our students' capacity to do this work, but also to give them a chance to debrief together and do some action planning together. And so we'll be running the Voting Power Core from now through the election. And then our goal really is to build on that. And through the Humphreys Institute and the work we're already doing, we're going to be asking these students to also be building their political advocacy skills. So we're really building on what we already do very well at the Humphreys Institute and at the UConn School of Social Work. And we're looking to really enhance that in a very robust way. Hopefully I did justice, but I think my 3 minutes of fame are probably up.
Thank you. No, that was fantastic. And we are done. So I will just say that we're here to answer questions, and we'll look at the chat, and I'm going to stop sharing here. And thank you so much, Angela.
Just to reiterate, the organizational assessment assignment, one of the assignments is available on the website. We will make sure that everyone has a link to that. So I just wanted to let people know. And question came, will we make this PowerPoint and available? And yes, we will. Okay. I don't see any questions, so we're going to move on now to Katerina Werner, who is going to take us through a wonderful assignment that she developed.
Thank you, Beth. Hi, everybody. So my name is Kat. I'm the field director and clinical faculty here at the School of Social Work at the University of Montana in Missoula. I got a few folks reaching out about the time because it is 2:30 here in Montana. So I think a few folks are waiting, ready to go East Coast time. So glad we figured all that out. But yeah, hello from Missoula. I want to briefly just share the screen here, and I'll just highlight, hope everybody can see this, where these assignments are available on the Voting and Social Work website. And so down here are the links, and this is the organizational assessment that Tanya and Beth were referring to. So you're able to download that, and then there is a Word document available. And then this website, of course, has so many great resources for field education for social work students. Many of them I am referring to in this assignment that I'll just briefly review. And I want to thank Tanya and her colleague, because you've really made it easy in so many ways, because you have just shared so many examples of both research, outreach, awareness, education, and then action that basically students can basically use in these different phases of this assignment. And I'll share that, really as part of this group and initiative, when we first got together, we were really thinking about, from the field director lens, from the field program lens, that we were wondering how we could support students in ensuring that they're reaching their hours during this pandemic. And so, as we're brainstorming, I think these activities, these assignments, and then this Q&A today, really were developed to serve multiple purposes. And one of them was certainly to embrace our professional commitment to social, economic, racial justice, while also embracing our commitment to political action as social workers and in our profession. And so, really, this is very much a group effort here. And so as we're brainstorming, we were thinking about, how could we make sure that students don't just jump into action right away, but really that the way this assignment is modeled and the way I have talked about it with my students is, as you can see, it's basically structured into 3 phases, right? So the idea was that students would develop an individual action plan, because this could certainly look different for students in different communities, and activities and education and outreach efforts will likely look different in rural and tribal communities here in Montana versus more urban areas in other more urban areas across the nation. And so the hope is that students, with your support, with the support of their agency field instructors and the support of their field directors or field liaisons, would really develop an action plan that would include activities that are specific, that are measurable, right? So really, what is the outcome? For example, registering 3 to 5 new voters, right? That's a measurable outcome. And that they're, of course, timely. I want to highlight here, and we talked about this as a group, that yes, of course, we have a big election coming up, but this is an activity, and these are generally assignments and tasks that should continue after this fall, right? And after this 2020 election, into other elections next year, into the spring and moving forward. So really the way it's broken up is into an initial research phase where, a student should really think about what is the context of their social work, their practicum agency, what is the population that they're serving and working with, what does voting generally look like in their state, what are specific barriers. Tanya was mentioning, of course, voter suppression efforts. Again, thinking about the state of Montana, we have very significant barriers to our Indigenous populations voting, and so that is something particularly our students, my students here, could look into, and really thinking about vulnerable and disenfranchised populations. And so doing some research into that. We were talking about, with with the recent concerns around defunding of the U.S. Postal Service, what are absentee ballot guidelines in the state, in your state, right? And how late can somebody sign up for an absentee ballot, and what does that look like? So some really basic research into barriers to voting, general deadlines and guidelines to voting. What does somebody need for same-day registration to be a voter, right? What if somebody doesn't have an ID? So some pretty basic research pieces here to make sure that students, when they move into the action phase of this project, of this assignment, have those answers as they're working potentially with clients. So these are very much activities and examples that are rooted in Tanya's and the initiatives that her school's work already, and so much of that is really rooted in the Voting is Social Work and the Humphrey Institute website. Trying to see here if there's any questions coming in. Feel free to touch base and of course use the chat if any questions pop up. The second phase would be an outreach and education phase, and really thinking about, how can you share the findings of your research, right? So how can students present back to not just agency staff or board members or volunteers, but also potentially their clients, right? And so really the power of education of the clients in their agency setting. Are they able to potentially recruit elected officials that are running for office? In the state of Montana, our candidates and elected officials are very available. And so, is it possible to set up a Zoom call with somebody? And so have their voice at the table. There's, of course, again, resources already in place for social work students. The Voting is Social Work website, again, has a training that social work students could add to or adapt and add and make it relevant for their state and for their agency context and population. So that would be the second phase, right? This research phase and then the outreach phase. And then, of course, all leading up to really focus on the engagement and mobilization piece, right? So is it possible that students could coordinate a voter drive at their agency, on their campus potentially? And so then again, that very specific number, right? Like how many people are you able to register to vote? Reviewing, these are again all ideas that were already shared, right? Reviewing agency forms and policies, and really I think our students in field, they're in this unique position where they really get to kind of question and critically analyze the status quo, right? Why is there no question on our intake form? This is, again, nonpartisan, and somebody mentioned this earlier. These are nonpartisan efforts, right? And so having students, I think, really utilize their unique position of being a learner and being able to bring up these questions and push to make these changes in their agency, I think is really part of this action phase. So, again, are they able to really build up this individualized action plan, and then have, ideally before the election in November, of course, would they be able to kind of move into some of these action activities? There's some wonderful resources that, are listed. Again, many of them will lead you back to the Voting is Social Work website. And so very initial kind of draft that students can build on and use, and of course tie them into the social work competencies. I think one thing to consider is also, I think there could be a fourth phase, which would be an evaluation, right, or a debrief of the process within their field seminars, within maybe their policy classes, obviously with their agency field instructors. And so, this is, again, just a brief overview of how these phases could be built up. And then, of course, each student, with the support of their agency supervisor, is responsible to really structure their own assignment and their own activity here. I want to just briefly mention, the way I went about sharing this information was that I have an email that I sent out to both my students, where basically highlighted that these are opportunities for supplemental, for additional practicum hours, should they be in a position where they need those additional hours during the pandemic. And then I also send an email with that information to our agency field instructors, so our supervisors, really just a brief overview, letting them know here are some additional activities that would really align with students' learning at your organization and would very much benefit your organization and your clients, and they will also meet that potential need for additional hours. So that's how I promoted this information and these assignments and got the word out. And then I will likely also offer an info session for students, so similar to this, where I'll just invite my students that are interested in participating in this assignment, or Tanya's, the needs assessment, the organizational assessment that was shared. And so that's kind of where my head is at in terms of really recruiting students. And, when we had talked about in our work group, I mean, even if we're a fairly small program here in Missoula, we have about 120 students in field placements at any given time. And even if only 10 or 15 of them engage in this assignment, I would very much consider that as a success. And so we'll see. I got my fingers crossed, and I'll be bugging my students to think about this. But yeah, so that's just a quick overview of kind of this vision of how this could be used.
Yes, great. Thank you. Clapping. I see people are clapping. I was just thinking how great it is that, this campaign was really launched in late 2016, I think, mainly through Terry Mizrahi and Mimi Abramovitz's efforts, and how far we've come during that time to really begin integrating this work into the field. So it's very, it feels very good. And thank you, Kat. I don't see.
Really quick, there was 2 questions. One was came in the private chat to me. Ruth Kozlovsky was asking if we work with Reclaim Our Vote. Does anybody know? Tanya, Becky, Beth?
I don't know about
Does not
that.
ring a bell, yeah. And then another question, and that's a relevant one, of course, to think about is, Amy Myers was asking, how are you managing? Should the agency need the student for the required number of hours, but this is in anticipation of needing hours? So that's a great point. Yeah, I think it's a conversation to have. I mean, I certainly have some students who will do their 15 to 20 hours. For us is usually what students average each week. And some students, I had one student reach out, she's very excited and she wants to do this in addition. And again, I think for this phased assignment, really thinking about, it will look different for every student. And so, we're talking about 50 to 75 hours. Maybe there's a student who only does phase 1 and 2 and does research and then presents back and has less hours. And so maybe, this is a student who will only do 2 or 3 hours a week focusing on this specific assignment. So again, I think there is flexibility with that. If you're totally right, a lot of agencies, of course, bring on students because they have a very specific need. And so it might not work for all students, but I think there's flexibility in really thinking about how many hours can be contributed to these phases, to this research, to, to the needs, to the assessment, organizational assessment, or other activities that were presented upon. Anything to add on that? Yeah.
I'll just jump into the previous question about Reclaim Our Vote and other efforts such as, I mean, there's tons, right? Black Votes Matter, Reclaim Our Vote. I think what I get drawn to this, if you look at the webpage, but also if you're active in the community, if your students are, is the assignment can be adapted and working with already organized groups. So it's not that students have to start from scratch or the agency has to start from scratch. There's a wide range of possibility. You're just hearing some examples. So absolutely, voter suppression and the ability to target certain populations that you may be working with through your agency or whatever, exactly right. So it's a question of, it's not whether we are, it's whether that is an appropriate place for you to connect up with, whatever group it is, if that makes sense. Because I think, and Kat, you mentioned it, rural, there's rural, tribal, urban, lots of ways. And again, and what to me is the beauty is the as is the beauty with field, is constructing your own plan, or as an agency, working with the agency to construct a plan that will be sustainable on an ongoing basis, ideally, but just to jump in there.
May I add just one sentence? Hi, so, I wonder how many of you are students joining this session today. I think there are many of you. So when we are planning this webinar, we're saying that maybe, field education has asked so much to the agency already. But if a student asks their field instructor themselves to see that's what you want to add to your assignment, maybe that can be more impactful in making some changes. So just wanted to say, as a field director, I'm so delighted that you're joining, and I see each one of you as a student, who are the change agents. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kaneko. Yes, well said. One last point here from Terry Mizrahi, which everyone could see, that there's a link to becoming a poll worker on our website, I believe, and possibly giving students the day, not a day off, but a day of voter engagement on election day. Okay, I want to move us forward. Thank you, everyone who's adding more resources here. That's great. I want to invite Carolyn Solo, who is here from Bryn Mawr. Carolyn is a PhD student there, but she is also the student activities coordinator, student services coordinator, and is working with a group of students. And I thought it would be great to hear what they're doing.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Beth. So we started working with a group from Columbia School of Social Work called, I think they're working on something called the Purple States Initiative, is the term for it. And they're pairing with schools in Pennsylvania, of social work in Pennsylvania and Florida. They sort of adopted 2 purple states to work on voter turnout in the 2020 election. So they've built a lot of great infrastructure, and a handful of students from Bryn Mawr have kind of jumped into the breach there and sort of brought the resources to our students. So the Social Work Votes website, which I'll put a link to it in the chat, has great resources in terms of if students want to do phone banking or text banking, you can just link right into these events through the Social Work Votes website, for example. So actually right after this at 5, a group of students and I are going to be doing some virtual phone banking with the Columbia School of Social Work students. They also have a podcast with weekly interviews with people working on the ground doing voter registration in purple states. It's a nonpartisan effort. Even though the purple states can be a little problematic, I think at times, that name, it is a nonpartisan initiative aimed at voter turnout and voter registration. Something else we're doing is that we are having student representatives from our group attend every class, every social work class, just once and just for 5 minutes at the beginning of the class, just to say, just talk a little bit about the program, to give them resources for how to register to vote and how to increase voter turnout and just initiatives to work on individually or in their field placements. So that has been a focus of this as well, is how to talk to clients in a nonpartisan way about becoming engaged in voting. Let's see, one other thing that we were working on, which I think is really interesting, is we looked at data. We didn't collect it, but we looked at data from the 2016 election that looked at voter turnout amongst Bryn Mawr students, undergrads and grads. And you might assume that Bryn Mawr college students would be very, very civically engaged, which I think they're higher than the national average, but still the percentage of Bryn Mawr students who were registered to vote, who actually voted, was something like 60%. So there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of getting out the student vote. So we've been working with an office on the undergraduate campus on sort of a targeted email campaign for undergraduates. So yeah, there's a variety of things we're doing. We've kind of patched this group together very quickly, and I'm really impressed with how hard the students are working. They've been really doing a great job. So But the Social Work Votes website does have a ton of great resources that are really easy to just tap into if you have students who want to just, do text banking one day or something like that. And they have trainings on how to do that. It's very straightforward, really, really well organized. So thank you. That's what we're up to at Bryn Mawr.
That is great, Carolyn. And you're right. You pulled that together, and the students pulled that together really quickly at the start of the year. Becky, did you want to follow up at all about Silberman students?
It's actually Columbia, so I'm
Oh.
just, it's funny, it's how these things mushroom. So a shout out to Columbia and Bryn Mawr students who are organizing this. And then I heard about them, and I'm a field advisor at Silberman, and I'm like, wait a minute, let's go. And so now I'm gonna help anchor one of the nights. So they're actually phone banking 6 nights, 6 days a week. We decided Friday off, but again, it's linking with local on the ground groups in Florida and Pennsylvania, and that's where this idea of not reinventing the wheel, and also respect though, with local folks, and really getting to know that state in the text conversations one might have or phone banking. But so you did a great job, nothing more to add, except also to amplify a couple of things. One is, it's definitely past November. I mean, I think the idea, at least in New York, right, next year is mayor and city council. So everything that's being done now about educating and amplifying and engaging it feels like will build potential for local as well. So yes, linking with Florida and Pennsylvania now, but in general, it's raising the bar. And I think the other thing that may be obvious, but the other thing that gets me excited about this work is it crosses all levels of practice, right? So I'm currently at a school that has a macro concentration, but there are, this work and all the information about what voting can do, the social determinants of health, the sort of what it means for justice issues and power building for poor neighborhoods, it cuts across all levels of practice, clinical, group, and whatever. And so what's fun is to see schools that evidence that in their voting work, right? It can be interdisciplinary. It doesn't even need to stay within a school of social work. So I just get inspiration again from what students create at their own institutions when they get on fire about this. So it's one of the benefits I get from being a part of this.
Great. Thank you, Becky. I wanted to also just acknowledge Alberto Cifuentes, who's here and who has been at UConn, I believe, and has been working with Vote ER, which is a wonderful resource as well, and which does many things. And one of the things that is really key is how to lodge or integrate this discussion into practice and clinical practice. I know, I don't know if you want to say anything about that campaign. We do feature it on the website, but if you wanted to.
Sure, Beth. Hi, everyone. My name is Alberto Cifuentes Jr., a doctoral candidate and grad assistant at the UConn School of Social Work. I'm also involved in the Macro Social Work Student Network with Becky, and I have a lot of hats. So I have to say that Voting is Social Work has been one of our best partners in this work. And when I say us, I mean Vote ER. I'm the only social worker who's directly involved. So I have a lot of influences and I have a lot of voices that I want to integrate, including, Terry's, Mimi's, Tanya's. There are a lot of voices that I want to integrate that are so important to the work that we're doing. And even though Vote ER was initially meant for healthcare providers, for hospital workers, more hospital workers are engaged in using Vote ER than social workers. The whole idea of Vote ER was started by Dr. Alistair Martin. He's the founder and executive director. It was started by his interaction with a social worker. So social worker was the catalyst for this. And thank you, Becky and Tanya, for showing your VoteR badges. So this badge, which is part of the Healthy Democracy Kit, is just one tool that you can use. Even if you don't have the badge, you can still go to vote-er.org/social work, and you can still go to that site, and there's a lot of great resources like scripts, posters. You can download the badge onto your phone and use your phone as your badge, technically. So there should be no barrier in terms of using this. It is free, but if you don't want to wait the 2 or 3 weeks for shipping, I would just download it. I would just put it on your phone or download it off the website. But it is a really great tool. It's been really successful in getting people to either register to vote, or to vote by mail, because the VoteR is built on the premise that if we include a lot of the voices of marginalized people, be that young people, people of color, low income, those who are impoverished, if we include them in this, we'll have a more equitable democracy. And so we want them to vote safely. So we also offer the option, hey, do you want to know how to vote by mail or vote at home? Here's an option. So it's not just about getting out the vote, it's about making sure people vote safely, and that we do it in a way that's harm reductive. So I'm really proud of this project. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and consult the website. I'll put some stuff in the chat about it, but I'm really appreciative of Tanya Rhodes-Smith is the one who got me involved. So really appreciative to her for helping me make that connection. And of course, I do enjoy working with Becky, Mimi, Terry, and the other Voting is Social Work crew. So thank you very much for this opportunity and networking and connection.
Yeah, thank you, Alberto. And Tanya just quoted, yeah, an example of one of the scripts that's on our website that you can use for starting the conversation. We are open for any other questions, and anyone else who would like to add anything at this time.
When you have a minute, Beth, I have a couple of things just to say and add to everything that's been said.
This is a good time.
I see we have about 7 or 8 minutes. Very, very happy. Just to add on, I want to say the concept of great minds think alike, because when we heard, was it Katrina, Kat, who said our students can ask the questions, we are the disruptors, the legitimacy of students to be the how come kids. Anybody as a student or as a field instructor here on the phone, courage, you can say, how come? You can ask that. Sometimes workers are intimidated, right? We hope they're not, social workers and other staff, but you can ask those, how come we don't have it on our intake form? This is a huge continuing campaign of ours forever, that there's no reason why an agency should not have that question. Are you registered to vote? It's sort of an obligation in many countries. You know, this is an opportunity. You're not telling them, of course, who to vote for, which party, if they're eligible. So I had just 3 very quick things to say for the end here about this voter suppression, the downside. Mimi and I were on a call. We're doing something with Long Island College, social workers and others, and we heard what I was very depressed, right? I heard that, you know, so many young people of all backgrounds are saying, and she said, not even young people, why should I vote? Why does it matter? Don't understand. They're all confused. You know, everything that they're feeling, we have to legitimate, right? And agree with, and, you know, and give some hope, right? Or give some alternative to staying home or voting, wasting their vote in some way, as we would say. And you just, I'm going to quote Tanya. I'm quoting a lot of people here. So if I didn't attribute you, you know, I'm not stealing your idea, that people are not asked. So I think we heard that the most reason, nobody asked me to register. So, don't assume, right? So that's one of the principles. Don't assume your neighbor next door. I won't even assume that 100% of all of you are currently registered and know where to go on election day. It happened to me with a family member who was very educated, and didn't know what the hell to do. He hadn't voted in a few years, and like, where do I start? And when I heard that from him, it stuck. So, asking people if they are, it's the Hatch Act, we know that. It's legitimate, it's professional, it's ethical to do that. It's almost unethical not to, given what we've heard about our code of ethics and engaging ourselves. Second thing is, here's the three things you'll hear. My clients are too young, they can't vote. They're not eligible, and I may embarrass them if I ask. They're too busy with other priorities. 3 sentences to answer those, and of course there's much more on the website, and you will know many of the answers and have probably given them yourselves. Too young, they have family members. They're going to vote next time. It doesn't end on November 3rd, right? It sort of begins for people. Our students were the catalyst for this in 2016. We heard that 60%, we found out, of our New York City agencies, they did nothing, did zero in 2016 to help people register or get out. Can you imagine in New York City social work agencies, 60% did nothing? That's what got us started. And then finding Tanya's website, Voting is Social Work, we made a great marriage. So far, we're still married. The second thing is the mental health aspects. I wanted to stress what somebody else said. Clinical folks, we think we have a PowerPoint that's a vetted one that speaks to clinical folks, why it empowers you individually and as a community, that empowerment issue. It's a mental health intervention. And that's not exaggerating. There's data. I think there's some studies on our resources, tons of wonderful resources, annotated resources there. And the other is, if you're not eligible to vote because you're not a citizen, getting involved with your political leaders, letting them know you're still a constituent, and I'll add with the census, right? There's still a few days to get folks to be counted. Social work counts. That's it.
Thank you, Terry. And I wanted to give Mimi Abramovitz, wanted to say a few words. You're muted.
Trying to keep myself quiet. So I put this in the chat in response to something that Beth said, but I'm sitting here feeling so proud of social work. Mm-hmm. So proud of all that you are doing, and it just really warmed my heart. And I just wanted to say that because only a few people talked, and there were over 100 people on this call, so we can imagine what is going on in our field. So, and the field never gets full credit in social work education, right? Kind of the stepchild, but that should not be. We don't see it that way. As you know, the fieldwork is the hub of our campaign because we sit between, it's at the field work that you sit between the individual and society, and you get to do all this kind of work. And under these trying conditions now, it's just, I'm utterly amazed. I'm dumbfounded and really, really proud to be a social worker with you all. And I also wanted to say that next week on September 29th, there's going to be another webinar. I don't know if you were going to announce that, Beth, but I'll just say it now then. A webinar that CSWE the Council on Social Work Education has partnered with us. And we are doing another webinar for that constituency. You all will be invited to come, and we hope you'll come. It'll be different than this one, some overlap, but we really hope you'll come. 1, we need a big turnout, and 2, I think you'll find it interesting. And we're very happy that CSWE has given so much support and to us by arranging to put all of our messages on the social media. I hope you'll find them there, and also for donating the time of their communications director to help us with this webinar. And Melissa, who is on here, she's going to be speaking on that webinar along with several of us from the campaign. itself. So it's kind of a last-ditch effort, but not a little one, to help people to back up what you are doing. And hopefully, and I'll tell you one other thing we're doing that might also help. We're going to be on tomorrow, Terry and I, and then Tanya are going to be on a webinar with the National Association of Deans and Directors, trying to see what they're doing from that level of social work, and to encourage them to give you all and the faculty all the support they can to promote this, to support and promote the work that you're doing. So a lot is happening, but you are the central part of it. I can't get over it. So thank you. And thank you, Beth. Beth, you're unmuted now, but thank you, Beth, and all the leadership of our fieldwork team for putting this together. It's been most inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, a big hand to everyone involved in this effort. And I think that we are actually at the 5 o'clock Eastern Time hour. So I think that we'll end, but I just want to say thank you all. And we have a lot of resources for the work that we have ahead of us. And it's great to see everyone. So thank you. And the webinar is I'm sorry, Tuesday the 29th. Someone asked.
1 o'clock Eastern.
1 o'clock Eastern Time on the 29th of September.
And I think, Tanya, we hope we'll send out an email through the center to everybody.
I'm not sure. I just want a little word of caution. I'm not sure, and again, I could be wrong, if it goes beyond the CSWE membership and the schools, but for sure every school, meaning your dean or director, will get that, and I'm not sure how they share it, but certainly we'll send out anything we can to get you, if you think, and not for you, if it's certainly not you, inviting a colleague who couldn't be on today and who might be wanting to get involved.
But we also just want you to know that the support is building at all levels of the social work, education, infrastructure, and that's really a new thing, and that's really, really great.
Yep, great. Okay, thank you again. Great to see you all.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.